our thoughts and feelings come from our memories. Our thoughts and feelings come from the things we're exposed to in terms of knowledge and the experiences that we have in our life. So when you have an experience or you learn something new, your brain begins to physically change and you wire that in your brain. You have new circuits to reflect that event. So there's a fingerprint or a footprint in your brain. When you have an experience and the experience produces an emotional quotient, that's what experiences do. They have a residue of emotion. Emotions are the end product of experience. Then how you think and how you feel, for the most part, is a record of your past. And your brain is an artifact of the past. It is a reflection of everything you've been exposed to in your environment. And your body, if you're living by the same emotion, and those thoughts are driving the emotions, and the emotions are driving the thoughts, and the thoughts are driving the emotions, then your body, as the unconscious mind, is believing it's in the past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. To the body, it's literally living in the past. So now, if our thoughts and feelings then are a record of the past, and you take a series of thoughts and you connect a thought to a feeling, 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 that's called an attitude. So you have a series of good thoughts that are connected to a series of good feelings. You say you have a pretty good attitude, you know? And if you have a series of negative thoughts that are connected to some negative feelings, you would say you have a pretty bad attitude. Now, how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. Thoughts are the language of the brain, and feelings are the language of the body. And how you think and how you feel creates a state of being. You got it? So now, if you take an attitude, an attitude, an attitude, and you string a series of attitudes together, that's called a belief. And a belief is just an extended state of being. So if an attitude is a shortened state of being and a belief is an elongated state of being, we could say then that a belief is a thought you keep thinking over and over again until you fire and wire it in your brain, and it has a component of emotion that then begins to condition the body into believing it's true. So then, if you keep thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking in the same way, and you condition your body to be the mind of that state of being, an unconscious process, then a belief is an unconscious state of being. So we have beliefs about money, we have beliefs about spirituality, we have beliefs about relationships, we have beliefs about drugs and pills and medicine, we have beliefs about governments, we have beliefs about everything. Weight, it's all diet, it's all beliefs. So then, a belief is an extended state of being that becomes an unconscious process because the body has been hardwired neurologically and emotionally conditioned. So the boundaries of our beliefs then become the way we feel about things. So when you're exposed to a new belief and it's outside of your emotional acceptance, that's the moment people say, I don't believe it, it doesn't feel right to me. So then if you take a belief and you string beliefs together, that's called a perception. And a perception has everything to do with the relationships you have, the choices you make, the things you create, and the behaviors that you demonstrate. So then in order to change your beliefs and perceptions about yourself in your life, you have to change your state of being. And in order to change your state of being, you have to make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries an emotional quotient or a level of energy that's greater than the hardwired programs in your brain and the emotional conditioning of your body or addiction of your body, and your body literally responds to a new mind. In other words, how can a person in a state of religious ecstasy drink strychnine and have no biological effects? They make a decision to change their state of being, and it's energy that does that. It's electromagnetism. They're not saying, geez, I wonder if this is poison.
Right.
The moment they're in that state, they're in a limited state of being. They're more matter and less energy. How can a person in a state of absolute faith chew on glass and have no biological effects? Their decision in that moment transcends their biology. It transcends their circuitry. It transcends their genetics. In that moment, they're out of time. A person who takes a poisonous snake in a state of absolute certainty and allows the poisonous snake to bite them and they have no blood coagulation. How does that happen? They're in a different state of being. Their choice then transcends the old, and in that moment, their body literally is immune to the conditions in their environment, and they're literally living outside time. So then, if a belief is an unconscious state of being, then in order for us to then make a change. And let's just say your belief about something because of your past experience with relationships, we'll make this up. You have experiences in relationships, and those experiences have an amplitude of energy. In other words, the experience has a neurological imprint in the brain and an emotion that's conditioned in the body. And that's really your past. So then from that experience, you view your life from this experience. Well, in order for you to rewrite the program, the amplitude of choice has to be greater. The amplitude has to be greater than that experience. And if it is, and it rewrites the program neurologically and conditions the body emotionally, then the past no longer exists, because the choice is an experience that you never forget. And the end product of an experience is an elevated emotion, and that's when the body begins to change. People then have a belief through their experience and through their conditioning that these elements are going to help them. And as a matter of fact, if they believe that they will, there's a greater chance that they will help them. And if the doctor, if she or he are sitting in the presence of them and tells them what it's going to do, and they have the right body language and the right presence, their belief in accepting that works even greater. So now, the morphogenetic field of what's possible now. So if this is a huge morphogenetic field of pharmaceuticals, and now we're teaching people that they can actually change their state of being without relying on a sugar pill, without relying on a saline injection, that's a philosophical concept. But it doesn't have an imprint through experience, enough imprinting through experience in the quantum field. So then, if you're overcoming your anxiety and the person next to you is overcoming their MS, and then the person down the street is overcoming their chronic pain by changing their state of being, without any resources outside of them, without any drugs, without any surgeries, they're changing it just by changing their state of being. If enough of those people imprint that experience into the quantum field, because the experience literally begins to upscale the knowledge in the field. Right. In other words, it's an information field. So now you have access. So the more you do it and the more we have more people doing it, that community of experience begins to expand, and it becomes more accessible because it's more readily available. More than 50% of every person that's on their way to their first chemotherapy treatment, 50% or more, on their way to their first chemotherapy treatment, they get nauseous on their drive over to their first chemotherapy treatment because the doctor told them they were going to get nauseous. In other words, they selected a potential in the quantum field. They focused on that potential to the exclusion of everything else. They had the thought, that's clear intention, and they married that clear intention with the emotion of how they're going to feel. When you think and feel a certain way, you move into a state of being. And they knock their body out of balance just by thought alone. So if 50% of every person on their way to their first chemotherapy treatment gets sick on their drive over, 50% of the people in this culture can get well on their on their way to work. It's the same exact thing. It's just the expectation of either choosing in something wonderful happening or choosing in something terrible that happened. Now, in choosing the terrible, we always choose the known, right? We're always choosing we're choosing that known because it's based on our past. I say, let's expect the unknown. Let's expect the unexpected. Let's choose a potential in the field that's an unknown, and it exists. It literally exists as a possibility. For the most part, if you look at the definition of genes allow us to make proteins. So you have a gene that makes muscle cells make muscle proteins. They're called actin and myosin. Skin cells make skin proteins. They're called collagen and elastin. And stomach cells make stomach proteins, pepsin, et cetera, et cetera. So the body's a protein-producing machine. But in order for the body to make proteins for structure and function, the gene has to be expressed to make those proteins, right? So we express 1.5% of our genes. The other 98.5% is called junk DNA. As a matter of fact, if you took a skin cell and you stretched out all the genes of a skin cell, it would be 6 feet tall. If you took out all the genetic material out of your entire body and you stretched it out from end to end, it would go to the sun and back 150 times. If you took all the genetic material out of the 7 billion people on the planet and you scrunched it together, it would fit in a grain of rice. Now, genes are a parts list of potentials. They're libraries of possibilities. Out of the 1.5% of the genes that you express, you're 98% chimpanzee. You're only a few hundred genes away from a chimp. 70% rat, some more than others, but roughly 70%. People don't understand that genes are not the answer to who they are. You have 100,000 proteins that in your body. you have 40,000 regulatory proteins that make those proteins. So then we should have 140,000 genes that make 140,000 proteins. The answer is we don't. We have 25,000 genes that make that many. So now we're talking about variations, combinations, sequences, and patterns. And when you look at this more closely, one gene can have 35,000 different variations.
Really?
So now we're talking about this whole phenomenon that's very nonlinear. So there are networks and components and communities of connections about how genes begin to express themselves. So when you confront or address adversity or difficulty in your life, if you're addressing that adversity and doing the same thing that creates the same experience produces the same emotion, and the same emotion signals the same gene in the same way. So if you're angry at your ex-husband, if you're judgmental of your coworker, if you're impatient in traffic every single day, then it's the same information coming from the environment chemically. Now, as the organisms in evolution, if there's an organism that's embracing cold conditions, or heat, or altitude, or current, or predator and prey, as the organism is exposed to those environmental conditions, they have to change their behaviors in order to survive. They have to adapt. So if they change their behaviors and they have a new experience would produce a new chemical expression. So now as the organism begins to embrace the environmental conditions, over a series of exposures to the same environmental conditions by changing their behaviors, the new experiences produce new chemical feedback from the environment that signals the gene. And if it's cold, the organism grows thicker fur. Fur is a protein. If it's altitude, hemoglobin bonds to oxygen more. That's a protein. If it's current, the bigger tail fin. If it's predator and prey, longer legs. So the bodies begin to adapt to the environmental conditions. So then, if you're living by the same emotions every single day, you're keeping the same genes turned on and the other genes turned off, and you're headed for your genetic destiny. Now throw in those limited emotions of anger and survival and depression and hatred and judgment and unworthiness and guilt. Now you're dysregulating the gene, and now you're more matter and less energy. In other words, the body is becoming more dense, and if the denser the body becomes, the more we're subject to the laws of thermodynamics, which is matter tends to break down in time. Disorder, right? The second law of thermodynamics. Change your energy then. And now if you can really change the level of energy, that creates a level of coherence, and you begin to learn new knowledge, you begin to wire it in your brain, you demonstrate that knowledge, you create a new experience creates a new emotion, and now you're teaching your body emotionally what your mind has intellectually understood. You're embodying knowledge in that moment. The latest research shows that our genes and our receptors on our cells are at least 100 times more sensitive to electromagnetism, to electricity, to energy, than they are than to chemistry. And that when you get the hair on the back of your neck standing up, and you feel empowered, and you feel enriched, and you feel, enthusiastic, boy, oh boy, the cells are getting new information in that moment. You've come out of your resting state, and you go from particle to wave. And when your heart opens, the field goes from a few inches around your body to 9 meters around your body. Now you're saying, there's potentials in the quantum field that I want to tune into, but in order for you to do that, you have to emulate the divine.